The spark arrived at dawn. Mr. Bean sat bolt upright, eyes wide and fixed on a singular, impossible goal: to craft the most legendary breakfast in history. He did not walk to the kitchen. He marched. His feet slapped against the cold tiles, a rhythmic, uneven beat that echoed through the quiet house. Teddy sat perched on the edge of the table, button eyes unblinking, watching the operation unfold. Mr. Bean reached the counter and stopped, hands on his hips, surveying the battlefield. He swung the fridge door open with a sharp, decisive tug. His eyes darted across the shelves, scanning for the perfect components. He snatched a carton of eggs, a jug of milk, and a solitary, knobbly carrot. He tossed them onto the counter, one by one, the thuds punctuating the silence. He paused, looked at the pile, and muttered, "Why not to the empty room?" He grabbed a ceramic mug, held it up to the light to check for imperfections, and set it down with a firm click. The stage was set. The ingredients were ready. His hands hovered over the eggs, fingers twitching with anticipation. He took a deep breath, braced his shoulders, and prepared to begin the masterpiece. He gripped the first egg with surgical precision. He tapped it against the ceramic rim once, twice, then gave it a sharp, confident strike. The shell fractured, but the force was too great. A jagged, oversized shard plummeted directly into the golden yolk. Mr. Bean froze, his eyes widening in alarm. He lunged for a metal spoon, plunging it into the mug with frantic, splashing motions. He stirred the mixture like a man possessed, eyes locked on the floating debris. The spoon caught the edge of the shell. He yanked his hand upward in a triumphant arc, but the momentum was too much. The fragment flew from the spoon, tracing a high, graceful trajectory across the kitchen. It slapped against the wall with a wet, heavy thud, sticking firmly to the paint. Mr. Bean stood motionless, watching the shell slide slowly down the surface. He did not look annoyed. He did not look defeated. Instead, he tilted his head, studied the position of the shell on the wall, and gave a slow, satisfied nod. He adjusted his posture, cleared his throat, and turned back to the counter, convinced that the wall now looked significantly better than it had a moment ago. He turned his attention to the milk carton, his expression one of intense, scholarly focus. He grabbed a bowl from the stack, held it aloft, and tilted the carton with a flourish. He did not notice the bowl was upside down. The milk hit the ceramic base, bounced, and cascaded in a white, frothy river directly onto the table. It pooled rapidly, flowing toward the edge and dripping onto the floor with a rhythmic, heavy sound. Mr. Bean blinked, his eyes tracking the liquid. He flipped it over with a sudden, jerky movement, satisfied that he had solved the mystery. He poured again. This time, the milk stayed inside the bowl for a heartbeat, but a hairline crack in the bottom began to weep. A steady, persistent drip formed, landing directly onto his toes. Teddy leaned away, inching toward the safety of the fruit bowl, as if distancing himself from the unfolding catastrophe. Mr. Bean tapped the bottom of the bowl, trying to seal the leak with his thumb, but the milk only diverted, running down his wrist. With the milk puddle ignored, Mr. Bean turned his attention to the solitary, knobbly carrot resting on the counter. He picked it up, rotating it slowly in his hand, examining the uneven surface with a critical eye. He needed a peeler, but his gaze landed only on a plastic ruler lying nearby. He snatched it up, testing the edge against his thumb. He positioned the ruler against the carrot, bracing his feet for the task ahead. He applied pressure, dragging the plastic edge down. The carrot resisted, its surface stubborn and rough. Mr. Bean leaned in, his tongue poking out in concentration, and pushed harder. With a sharp, sudden crack, the plastic snapped in two. Shards flew across the kitchen, pinging off the toaster. He stood frozen for a moment, blinking at the broken pieces. He looked at the mangled carrot, then at the jagged stump of the ruler. He simply dropped the broken plastic, tossed the carrot into the air, and caught it with a shrug. He was already scanning the room. Mr. Bean turned his gaze toward the toaster, which sat on the counter like a silent, metallic judge. He jammed 2 slices of bread into the slots, his movements sharp and precise. He pressed the lever down with a firm, confident thumb. It clicked, but the internal coils did not glow. He waited, his head tilted, listening for the familiar hum of electricity. Silence filled the kitchen. He tapped the metal casing with his knuckle, producing a hollow, mocking sound. He shook the appliance, but the bread remained stubbornly unheated. A flicker of genuine irritation crossed his face. He leaned in close, pressing his ear against the cold metal, squinting as if he could detect a hidden fault. He stood back, hands on his hips, and glared at the machine. It was a standoff. He would not be defeated by a kitchen appliance. He pivoted on his heel and marched out of the room, his footsteps heavy and purposeful. Moments later, he returned, clutching a hairdryer like a weapon of war. He aimed the nozzle directly at the toaster's vents, his finger hovering over the power switch. He took a deep breath, braced his feet, and prepared to force the machine into submission. Mr. Bean flicked the switch. The hairdryer roared to life, a high-pitched whine that filled the kitchen, blowing a fierce gale of hot air directly into the toaster's vents. He squinted against the blast, his hair whipping wildly around his head. He moved the nozzle closer, watching for any sign of life from the stubborn machine. Suddenly, the internal mechanism clicked with a violent, metallic snap. The coils glowed a brilliant, angry red. Before he could react, the toaster surged, and the 2 slices of bread rocketed upward like twin projectiles. They cleared the counter, arcing through the air with terrifying speed. Mr. Bean had no time to dodge. The first slice struck him square in the center of his forehead. The second slice clipped his ear and tumbled to the floor. He stood frozen, the hairdryer still humming in his hand, a piece of warm, browned bread clinging to his face for a heartbeat, before sliding slowly down his nose. He blinked, his eyes crossing to track the descent of the toast. He remained perfectly still, the silence of the room returning as he lowered the hairdryer. He didn't move. He didn't brush the crumbs away. He simply stood there. Mr. Bean peeled the stuck toast from his face and dropped it onto the counter. He looked at the mess surrounding him, the shattered eggshells, the puddle of milk, the burnt bread, and the knobbly carrot. A new, chaotic inspiration took hold. He grabbed a plastic ruler and attempted to peel the carrot, but the tool snapped under his grip, sending shards of plastic skittering across the floor. He ignored the debris. With a determined grunt, he swept the eggshells, the soggy bread, the carrot, and the remaining milk into a large, dented cooking pot. He shoved the pot onto the stove and cranked the dial to the highest setting. He found a wooden spoon and began to stir. The mixture resisted, thick and lumpy, but he worked it with frantic energy. He added a splash of water, then a pinch of something from a nearby jar, watching as the contents began to heat. The concoction bubbled, releasing a thick, gray steam that curled toward the ceiling. He leaned over the rim, his eyes wide, watching the sludge churn and fold over itself. It was a bubbling nightmare of culinary ambition. He gave it one final, vigorous stir, his arm muscles straining against the thick resistance of the stew. The pot hissed, the surface popped with viscous bubbles, and he stood back, hands on his hips, surveying his masterpiece with a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. Mr. Bean reached for the wooden spoon, his hand hovering over the bubbling pot. He lifted a heavy, dripping glob of the gray sludge, blowing on it with short, sharp puffs of air. He brought the spoon to his lips, eyes locked on the mixture as if expecting a miracle. He took a deliberate, brave bite. For a single second, he remained perfectly still, his mouth closed. Then, the reaction began. His eyebrows shot toward his hairline, then slammed down over his eyes. His nose crinkled, pulling his upper lip into a jagged, trembling line. He tried to chew, but his jaw locked, forcing his head to jerk backward in a rhythmic, involuntary spasm. His eyes bulged, darting wildly around the kitchen as if searching for an escape route. He attempted to swallow, but his throat constricted, causing his cheeks to puff out like a startled pufferfish. He let out a muffled, squeaking sound, his face twisting into a series of rubbery, grotesque shapes. He gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning white, as he fought to keep the bite down. He leaned forward, his tongue darting out. Mr. Bean finally forced the sludge down his throat, his eyes watering as he gasped for air. He looked at the remaining gray mass in the pot, then at Teddy, who sat motionless on the table. With a slow, deliberate movement, he slid the plate toward the small figure. He nudged it closer, waiting for a reaction that would never come. Suddenly, the plate tipped. Teddy pitched forward, his face burying deep into the thick, bubbling mixture. Mr. Bean froze, his hands hovering in the air. He stared at the submerged toy, his mouth hanging slightly open. The silence stretched, heavy and still, until a small, wheezing sound escaped his chest. His shoulders began to shake. A high-pitched giggle broke the quiet, followed by a sudden, explosive burst of laughter. He doubled over, clutching his stomach, his eyes streaming with tears of mirth. He pointed at the mess, then back at his own face, shaking his head. He reached out, pulled the plate back, and wiped the thick smear of egg and gray sludge from his nose with the back of his hand. He looked at the camera, his face smeared, and his eyes bright with genuine amusement. He took a deep, shaky breath, straightened his posture. "Best breakfast ever," he declared. He patted Teddy on the head and turned away from the kitchen, leaving the disaster behind.